Most people think inflation began with modern banks and paper money. Wrong. Its roots stretch back more than 2,000 years to the first time humans decided that a shiny piece of metal could represent trust. Money was never meant to multiply. It was meant to measure. A simple tool of fairness, equal value for equal effort. But the moment we learned how to create it, instead of earn it, we also learned how to destroy it. By the end of this story, you'll see why inflation isn't a modern disease. It's a symptom of something far older, something deeply human. The first currency didn't appear in a bank. It was born in fire. In the ancient kingdom of Lydia, around 600 BC, merchants faced a constant problem. Trade was slow and full of fraud. Every grain of gold dust had to be weighed, every silver nugget tested. It was exhausting, a world built entirely on trust and suspicion. Then one day, someone had an idea so powerful, it would reshape civilization. Instead of measuring gold each time, what if the king himself measured it once, stamped it, sealed it, guaranteed it? That tiny change, a seal pressed into metal, was the birth of the coin, and with it, the birth of inflation. Because the moment people believed the seal gave value, not the metal, power shifted from markets to monarchs. In Lydia, the king's seal became sacred. A coin wasn't just currency, it was faith you could hold. And at first, it worked perfectly. Trade exploded, cities thrived, and the Lydian coin became the envy of neighboring empires. But something strange happened. The more coins circulated, the more the king realized he could make. He didn't need new gold mines. He just needed to melt the old coins, add a little less silver, a little more cheap metal, and stamp his face on them again. No one would notice, right? At first, no one did. Prices crept up quietly. A loaf of bread that once cost 1 coin now cost 2. Merchants grumbled, but they blamed the market, the gods, the harvest, anything but the coins themselves. Then one day, trust snapped. People realized that the seal wasn't protecting value anymore, it was disguising theft. And once faith broke, trade collapsed. Lydia's currency and its empire fell together. But the idea didn't die, because the temptation to create value from nothing is too powerful to vanish. The fall of Lydia taught other empires two opposite lessons. Some saw money as a tool for growth, others saw it as a weapon. Greece embraced it first. Athens minted silver drachmas, beautifully stamped with the owl of wisdom. Each city-state made its own coin, each one a symbol of pride, freedom, and strength. Money became identity. It built temples, paid soldiers, and told the world who ruled the seas. But war is expensive, and when war came, as it always did, the same temptation returned. Greek treasuries ran dry, and rulers began shaving the purity of their silver. The coins still glittered, but their worth dimmed. Prices rose, markets twisted, citizens protested. The first financial crises weren't born in stock markets, they were born in metal. And just as before, trust, that invisible glue of civilization, began to peel away. But the Greeks only laid the groundwork. The next empire would perfect the art of creating money and destroying itself with it. When Rome conquered the Mediterranean, it didn't just absorb its lands, it inherited its lessons. And Rome's leaders were brilliant students of power. They saw money not as a tool, but as the bloodstream of empire. Control the flow, and you control the body. At first, it worked flawlessly. Rome's silver coin, the denarius, became a symbol of order. It paid armies, built roads, and fueled trade across continents. For 2 centuries, it held its value. But peace is fragile, and ambition is endless. Wars demanded more soldiers, more supplies, more gold, and soon, the treasury ran dry. So emperors turned to the oldest trick in the book. They changed the book itself. They reduced the silver content of the denarius first by a fraction, then by half, then by almost all. By the time of Emperor Caracalla, the coin was barely silver at all, a copper core with a silver coating, polished to look pure. It looked like money. It wasn't. Prices doubled, then tripled. Soldiers demanded more pay. The government minted even more coins to meet it. And just like that, the empire's wealth dissolved in its own hands. But Rome's story doesn't end here, because even as its coins turned worthless, its citizens discovered a truth that still echoes today. When money dies, people stop believing in the state itself. By the 3rd century AD, Rome was the richest empire on earth, at least on paper. But beneath the marble and glory, the economy was collapsing. The denarius, once nearly pure silver, now contained less than 5%. It had become a copper disc dipped in deceit. Merchants refused to accept it. Soldiers demanded payment in gold or grain or anything real. And to meet the army's hunger, the empire printed, or rather, minted even more worthless coins. Inflation turned into hyperinflation. Bread prices rose by 1,000%. People stopped saving. Bartering replaced trade. The government imposed price controls, punished hoarders, and blamed greedy merchants, the same excuses leaders use today. The empire's arteries, its money supply, clogged with fake value. When the coins failed, the roads stopped, armies deserted, provinces revolted. Rome didn't collapse overnight. It simply ran out of trust. But even as Rome burned, another civilization was quietly creating a miracle and a new way to make money appear from thin air. China, 11th century. The Song dynasty ruled over a golden age of trade and technology. Their merchants traveled across continents. But there was one massive problem: weight. Copper coins were heavy, and caravans carried thousands. So, ingenious bankers invented a substitute: jiaozi, the world's first paper money. Light, beautiful, and backed by metal stored safely in banks. It worked brilliantly. The economy exploded with efficiency. Merchants carried notes instead of mountains of coins. For the first time, money was truly portable. But as always, success breeds temptation. Wars drained the treasury. To fund them, the government printed more notes than it could redeem. Each new batch bought a little less than the one before. Prices began to rise. Confidence began to fade. Still, rulers insisted, it's temporary. Sound familiar? Within a few decades, people stopped trusting the paper. Markets seized. Inflation devoured the miracle that had created it. But the idea refused to die because paper was too convenient and power too addictive. When the Mongols conquered China, they didn't just take land. They took the technology of paper money and multiplied it. Kublai Khan demanded everyone use his new currency, the kale. At first, it unified trade across Asia. Then, the empire printed more and more until people began burning the notes for heat. By the late 1300s, the once great Yuan dynasty was ruined by the same invisible force that had destroyed Rome. Too much money, too little faith. The collapse was so severe that China abandoned paper money entirely for centuries. Generations grew up believing that only gold and silver could be trusted again. But paper had already planted its seed elsewhere in a small, divided continent, preparing for its own economic revolution. As the Renaissance dawned, Europe rediscovered ancient ideas and reinvented money. Merchants in Italy, France, and England needed a way to move wealth without moving metal. So they created a new instrument, the banknote. A banknote wasn't money itself, it was a promise, a claim to gold stored in a vault. The paper said, "Trust me, this is as good as gold." And for centuries, it worked, until the same pattern returned. Wars, debt, greed. Every government printed more notes than they could back. In 1720, the Mississippi bubble burst in France, a frenzy of paper speculation that ended with worthless currency and national ruin. During the French Revolution, the assignats revolutionary paper money lost 99% of their value in just 2 years. People used them as wallpaper. Across Europe, rulers discovered a simple equation. Printing money could buy time, but it always stole the future. And yet, nobody learned. Because while Europe's economies crumbled, another discovery was waiting, one that would make inflation not a disaster, but a deliberate tool. By the 19th century, money was no longer the domain of kings. It belonged to banks. Private institutions issued notes, managed loans, and for the first time, controlled interest rates. Governments promised to maintain the gold standard, but behind closed doors, they began bending the rules. Every crisis brought the same temporary measure. Print more notes, suspend convertibility, promise to fix it later. In 1914, World War I erupted, and nations printed like never before. The world's most powerful economies learned the Roman lesson all over again. By 1923, Germany's mark was so worthless that people needed a wheelbarrow of cash to buy a loaf of bread. Children played with stacks of notes like toys. And yet, leaders kept insisting the same lie. We just need to print a little more. Money had become fiction, and society was paying the price. But after the ashes of war, the world decided to rebuild. And this time, they believed they had finally found a system that could tame inflation once and for all. They were wrong. After 2 world wars, humanity faced a new kind of ruin, not of cities, but of currencies. From Berlin to London to Tokyo, economies lay in ashes. And yet, the solution everyone turned to was the same one that caused the problem: printing money. The United States emerged as the new financial power. It had gold, factories, and most importantly, credibility. In 1944, world leaders met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to design a new system. The idea was simple. Every country would link its currency to the US dollar, and the dollar would be backed by gold. Trust would have an anchor again. For a while, it worked. The world entered an age of growth, stability, and optimism. Factories roared, trade expanded, and the dollar became the world's heartbeat. But beneath the surface, the old temptation returned. The United States realized it could print more dollars than it had gold to cover. As long as the world believed, it didn't matter. By the late 1960s, foreign nations began asking to exchange their dollars for gold, and the vaults started to empty. And then, in one moment that changed economic history forever, the illusion ended. The 15th of August 1971, President Richard Nixon addressed the nation. With calm certainty, he announced that the US would no longer redeem dollars for gold. In a single speech, money was set free from metal, from limits, from reality. At first it seemed harmless. The economy kept growing. Governments discovered that if they could print without restraint, they could manage recessions, fund welfare, and build whatever they wanted. Economists called it fiat currency, money by decree. Value, they said, comes not from gold, but from the government's promise to keep it stable. For a while, it looked like magic. People bought homes, stocks soared, and credit became endless. But the true cost hid in the shadows. Debt ballooned, prices crept upward, and once again, the definition of value began to blur. The system had traded stability for flexibility and faith for convenience. But this time, something was different. Inflation was no longer an accident. It had become a strategy. Central banks embraced a mantra: a little inflation keeps the economy healthy. 2% became the magic number, small enough to ignore, big enough to erode. And every crisis brought the same cure: print more.